All right, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone has had a good start to the new week. It is Tuesday, just over 5 o'clock. It's August 6th, right? We're in the last couple weeks of summer. Some students are starting school next week, some in a couple weeks, but we're almost there, right? Now, for our seniors, obviously, there's a lot more stress as we're returning to school, as there are a lot of things to do. We have to make sure we're staying on top of our academics. We also need to make sure that we are getting through our applications and making sure that we have all those done as well. So with that, I do want to move into kind of like questions. I do want to move into kind of things that you guys want to talk about. Anything about the applications that you guys have seen as you're going through, those sorts of things would be good for us to go over. Okay, so if you guys do have questions, definitely bring them up either in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll make sure that we answer those questions. Okay, so I'm just gonna give some people a chance to look at things here. So as far as like drafts for PIQs, so we're leaving that to Coach Michelle during her office hours. If you do want us to look at a draft that you have, please send it into the submission portal so that we can go ahead and like use enough time to look at things, right? But if there's other questions about how to fill things out on your application, things like that, those are questions that we can definitely answer for you. Okay. But we've been getting essays back at a pretty nice clip for everybody. So, you're not waiting too long. It's usually just about that 24-hour period that you guys are waiting to get those essays back. And so hopefully you guys have been making good progress on everything. Okay. So Coach Michelle's office hours are Tuesday from 4 to 5 o'clock. I see another question here, so just answered that. Okay. So that's where you can go get extra help or get clarification or get this or get that, right? But we are also doing it in the essay submission portal. All you have to do is, follow the follow the instructions. We have different templates there that you can use to turn in your essays. We don't want your whole workbook. We just want the essays, right, that you want us to look over. You can put them into a template form, send them on over to us, and then we'll get you an answer back in about 24 hours. Okay. Once again, for those that are just joining us, thank you for being here. We're here to answer questions about applications. If we don't have questions about applications and kind of like senior questions, I will also answer other questions that our families do have. Okay. Okay. So this person, if you can just in the Q&A, because no one can see it in the Q&A, if you want to send me your student's name, then I can go ahead and ping you in Discord and let you know where the submission portal is. Again, if you guys have questions about anything, please feel free to reach out and ask us those questions. Okay. So there is a question in the Discord that I want to kind of bring up because it's kind of regarding seniors, right? And basically the question is, how should we pick our early decision choice, right? If we're going to go early decision, right? This family asked, hey, is it something that we should just look at like the common data set? But the common data set is a really bad set of statistics. The reason is because they only look at a few of the statistics of the students that have gotten in, right? So instead of doing that, right? I've worked with thousands of students, right? Coach Tony has worked with thousands of students. Coach Art has worked with thousands of students, right? And so instead, right, what we should try to do is look at the pros and cons of each school and figure out what makes the most sense in our situation. Okay. Okay, just give me a second. So I saw your reply to my question from earlier. Just trying to look you up here, make sure that we're sending to the right place. Okay, I'm searching for you here. Not finding anything. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I think okay, so for the student that we were talking about, kind of the essay submission portal, that essay submission portal is actually just for our coaching families, right? If you're part of our kind of like college application intensive, then we will be working on your essays during the college application intensive. Okay. So just wanted to make that clear. So that portal would unfortunately only be available to students that either are in our coaching program or that are either in we have a college essay service. A lot of our students sign up for that after the college application intensive because they want additional help afterwards, right? But if you do have questions about the applications, things like that, kind of general essays about questions about essays, can definitely help you out with those, right? Basically help you out with those now during this time here. Okay. And then we have another question here. It says, how do I balance my struggle in my essays without making it seem like a sob story? So this is a very, very, very good kind of question, right? So your struggle is a struggle, right? Whatever it was, right? Now, generally speaking, when we were talking about struggles, I don't want to say that there are levels to struggles, right? Because there aren't, right? But there is kind of like, if you think about it objectively, the question becomes, is it something that more people would think that is a struggle or less people would think that there is a struggle, right? But for a lot of our students, they talk about kind of like challenges that they faced and all these different things, and that's okay, right? It's not about, oh, please feel sorry for me, right? Instead, what it should be about is, okay, this is what happened, right? And this is how I overcame, right? These are the steps I took, the process I went through to become more than my challenge, right? Or to overcome this challenge, right? So one of the things that we always say for our essays is this, right? 30% of kind of the story should be about what happened, right? 70% of the story should be why it's important, what like how it's changed you, right? So don't focus so much on the struggle. And then if it's less a part of the kind of overall essay, then overall you should be okay. Okay. All right. So again, if you guys do have questions, right, about the applications, UC, Common App, coalitions, school-specific apps, I'm ready to, make sure that you guys understand exactly what's going on there, right? But these are great questions kind of starting out, right? We should be good to go. Okay. So just so everyone knows, most of the applications are already out now, right? So the UC application is out, right? The common application is out. One of the things I will say is this, though. Even though the common application is out, not all of the schools have updated their new kind of like 20 class of 2025 application yet. Okay. There are still schools that are waiting on those things to come in, right? But right, you can always look at last year's and kind of work off last year's as well, right? Because most schools do not change their essays, right? So you should be able to get a little bit of a head start there. So we have a follow-up question on the struggle stories, right? How would I describe its effects without being too direct and shallow, especially with word count? I find it hard to add depth to my essays. So you don't really need to talk too long about the effects of that challenge or that struggle that you faced, right? You need to make sure to focus your essays, right? One of the biggest problems that I find with a lot of students is that they have too much story. There's too much they're trying to tell, right? Instead of trying to tell the actual full story, maybe you just take one piece of that story, right? So let's for instance, maybe let's just use an example, right? So one of the struggles that I faced, right, about I think it was like 3 years ago now, but like around 3, 4 years ago, I had to have surgery on my foot, right? And it was a long process, right? So I had surgery on my foot. I actually had to get the same surgery over again because they messed up, right? So I was literally in bed and immobile for I'd probably say a total of about 6 months, right? Now, during that 6 months, I'm a very social being, right? I went outside and I did all this and I did all that, right? But I wasn't able to do that because I wasn't able to get around freely, right? Another problem was that in my house, there was a lot of stairs, right? And so just to get to the front door, right, I was like crawling around my house and like making sure I didn't put any weight on my foot and all this and all that. There was just a lot of things going on at the time. Now, if I told you the full story of that, then obviously I wouldn't be able to fit it into 350 words. But let's say I just talked about my loneliness, right? So I told you I had surgery on my foot, and that the hardest part of that process was learning how to be alone. And I focused on just that one part, right? Then the essay becomes a lot easier to understand, right? But if I told you about like, like I got infections and like the nurse had to come to my house and this and that and so on and so forth. And like when I had to take a shower, I had to wrap it up like I had a cast because it couldn't get wet and this there's just too much information there, right? So one of the things I will say for, for essays in general is this. Sometimes too much information is worse than having kind of like a very focused one piece kind of description of the challenge or what happened through it. Okay. So too much information can blur what you're trying to talk about. Okay. So remember, especially for shorter essays, right? Whether it's a supplemental or a UC, you need to focus your information, right? On the kind of Common App personal statement, you have more room, but again, you still want to make sure that it is very focused at like onto what you're talking about, right? You don't want to just be kind of going over here and then kind of going over there or this or that, right? One of the things that you have to remember is this, right? We tell students every single time, but for some reason, I don't think that they believe me, right? When the UC readers are looking over your application, they look over your application, your grades, your activities, your essays, and they do it in 4.5 minutes. That's literally how long they are given to look at your application, and then they make a decision. For your Common App schools, the private schools, right? I know there's also non-private schools on the Common App, but for the private schools, they take about 6 minutes, okay, to look over your grades, your activities, right? All the different parts, where you went to school, all these different things. They have 6 minutes to look over it. If your essay does not go from A to B to C to D to E, and it goes kind of like, ooh, and it's like really pretty and flowery and all these other things, you're going to lose your reader. Okay. So you need to make sure that your essay reads through very easily. Okay. So that's why one of the things that I do when I read a student's draft is this. If there's a big word that I can't understand, then we're taking it out. Okay. Now, obviously, I did high school. I did college. I went through a master's program. I went to law school, right? So I have a lot of schooling. If I cannot understand it, how do you expect an average American that is the reader for your application to understand that word? Okay, so it's not about using $67 Scrabble words. Okay, and it's about connecting with your reader, getting your point across. Okay, that is the most important part of your essays. Okay. All right, great questions, guys. If you have additional questions, please, please, please ask them in the Q&A or in the chat. Okay. So kind of going back to one of the questions that I answered in the Discord channel, right? One of the big things is that if you are a senior right now and you're thinking about early action or regular decision or early decision, okay, let me tell you the general rule of thumb, okay? For early action, if they have early action, my question is, why are you not doing it? Okay. Now, there are very select instances where you would not, right? Let's say that you didn't do too hot your junior year and you want them to see your first semester grades. That might be a situation where you do not apply early action or early decision. Okay. But generally speaking, if your grades have been on track or what I mean by on track is they've kind of been like similar throughout the years, everything is going like pretty similarly, right? Then apply early action, right? 100% of the time, right? So if there is early action, 100% of the time, you should be doing it, right? Early decision is a little bit different, right? Early decision is a little bit different because you are committed to going to that school. You sign, your counselor signs, your parent signs that if we get in, we will be going, okay? All right. We have some questions here. It says, do you have any tips for what I should do when I can't think of enough things to write about in my essays, even though I already have a topic for them, right? Okay, so here's the thing. If you have thought of a topic, right, and you're like, oh, this is the one I want to write about, and you find that you can't even write 350 words about it, it's probably not the right topic, okay? So what we have our students do is this, right? I'm not sure if you've looked through your workbook yet, right? But in the workbook, there is a brainstorming section or exercise that we have you go through, right? We ask you to look at like 4 core memories or experiences that have created who you are today. And we want you to go through that so we can understand, right? So the first thing that you should do after you kind of think of those 4 core memories is do a content dump, right? And what I mean by that is I want to know the story from start to finish of whatever happened, okay? After that, we can figure out kind of like, okay, why did these things happen? Or, kind of like, how did this affect me? We can figure those out. But before, we do need to figure out exactly what is going on with the story, okay? So that's what I would kind of suggest that you do, right? Now, a lot of students, like without kind of going through the workbook, they kind of come to us with essays about like, oh, like my educational experience that was the most important to me was AP Bio. Well, you have to remember, how many other kids have taken AP Bio? Probably millions across the United States and across the world, right? So we need to find things that are more uniquely you, right? Things that make you special, right? Now, a lot of the experiences that you have during high school, they're very similar to other high school students, right? But the one thing that is going to be different every single time, even if it's just a 0.01% difference, is the reason why you did something, right? So you need to kind of go deeper and see, do I answer why? Do I answer how it has affected me? Do I answer like, how did this affect who I am today? Those are the things that you should look into your essays about and see if those things are getting done. Okay. All right, so we have another question here, and it says, how should I approach a why us essay? So I actually did this in a training for Ivy League admission secrets. Okay. If you have access to Kajabi, you should go into Ivy League admission secrets. And I do talk about the why essays, right? But just very generally speaking, here's the answer to that. Okay. Your why essays it depends on which why it is, right? So there's usually 2 why essays. One of them is like, why do you want to study your major? Right? The other one is, why do you want to come to our school? So those are usually the 2 why questions, right? So let's start on the why question of, why do you want to study your major? Okay. So if your essay reads like this, I want to study blank because I think it's so interesting, right? We already got off on the wrong foot, okay? Again, one of the questions that we ask our students as they enter our program is like, oh, are there certain areas that you do want to study? And if they say yes, there are, right? Then the first question I ask them is why, right? And most of our students cannot answer this question, right? For a lot of students, it's like, oh, well, my parents do it, or, this or that, or like, I want to make a lot of money, or like, there's a lot of different answers to this question here, right? But, right, we have to think, okay, what were my motivations for starting? Now, I know, right, just like other students, right, even with generations passing, a lot of the times we start doing things is because our parents send us to something, right? I started playing piano because my mom sent me, right? I played for 10 years. I didn't enjoy one day of it, but I played piano, right? I went to, soccer practice. I did this, I did that. Why did I first start? Well, my parents sent me, right? Now, if we say that that's the reason why you want to study is because my parents sent me and now I like it, right? Still, again, a little shallow, right? But what we want to do in this section is tell them what were our motivations for continuing to search further, okay? So there's very few students it's like, oh yeah, I really love biology, I really love computer science, and it's kind of like, yeah, so I did CSP and CSA, and then I stopped because like I was like, okay, well, that's good enough for me, right? If that's really what you were interested in, you probably went further on your own. You did robotics, you did all these different things. You have to think about what the motivation was behind there, okay, beyond my parents sent me, okay? So that's what you should be thinking about for the why my certain major question, right? Now, when they're asking about why do you want to come to our school, right? Here is something that you need to remember about this question, okay? They're asking every single student that's coming to their campus this question, okay? So one of the things that we want to make sure to do is find information that other people are not going to find, right? So I'm just going to use a couple very like well-known examples so that you can understand what I'm saying, okay? So we have a lot of students that apply to Brown, okay? Now, one of the big things that Brown pushes that it's very special about is that, hey, we have an open curriculum, right? What an open curriculum means is that you can explore your different interest areas during your first and second year. Now, to be honest with you, every college has that. So it's not really special, but they've had like kind of like trademark that open curriculum term, right? Now, let's say that that's what you talk about. That's why you want to go to Brown. How many other kids do you think are going to write that exact same thing? Probably tens of thousands, right? But what about that piece of information that's like 12 clicks into the website and you find like a student like opinion article about a special tradition that Brown has like on, I don't know, November 11th at 11 p.m. that they do something special. Not a lot of kids are going to find that. Okay, so when you're looking for information about a school, if you can find it on the first page or second page, right, it's not good enough, right? It's going to be too out there. It's going to have too much exposure. Too many kids are going to write about it. The colleges want to know that you are interested enough to look deeper, okay? So you want to look deeper, 10, 12, 15 clicks into the website, okay? But there's a couple things that I say that you should not do, okay? Now, again, there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, these are some things you should not do. One of the things you should not do for kind of like the why our college essay, right, is you do not want to say, I want to go to this school because of this professor, okay? Professors can get fired, right? They could quit, right? They could pass away, right? Too many things can happen. So the question becomes, well, if that teacher isn't there anymore, if that professor is not there anymore, do you not want to come anymore, right? So that's one thing that I tell students not to talk about, okay? The other thing I tell students, generally speaking, again, there are some exceptions here that you do not want to talk about is, oh, I want to go to your school because it's in this city, right? I want to go to USC because it's in LA. I want to go to NYU because it's in New York. I want to go to Boston College because it's in Boston. That shouldn't matter at all unless the school is so closely connected to the city, right? That it's like you can't talk about them separately, right? Now, there's very few schools that are like that, okay? So, but, right, generally speaking, you don't want to talk about that. Even if USC was in the middle of Alaska, even if New York, like NYU was in the middle of the Siberian kind of tundra. You want to show them that that is a school that you want to go to, right? Regardless of where it is. Now, for your own personal kind of like reasons, that might be one of the reasons, right? But it's not something that you want to write on the actual application. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question there. All right, we have another question here. It says, will submitting an early action application without test scores affect merit aid from college? Well, here's the question. Do they require the test, right? So this is a very easy question, and this is how it gets answered, right? If they require the test and you don't turn in the test, well, you're disqualified anyway, so you're not going to get anything, right? If it's test optional, then because it's optional, that's not what's used to give merit aid, right? Now, I've had a lot of questions about merit aid and this and that, so on and so forth. There are some schools that give merit aid if you have like above a certain GPA, but like they're not very common, right? It's like ASU is a school that will give you aid if you have above a certain GPA. But other than that, there are very few schools that have a set standard of what they will give you if your GPA is above a certain level, if your SAT is above a certain level. Okay. Just generally speaking, I've seen students with like anyone like with above like a 3.0 has gotten money from ASU. Okay. So that's one school that a lot of our students have gotten money from. Sorry, I'm just lowering my standing desk here. So I'm gonna be short for a second, right? But, right, most schools, there's other factors that they're looking at. It might be your leadership, it might be your community service work, it might be other areas, but they will be looking at other areas for that. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question there. Again, if you guys do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A or in the chat there. All right, if you guys do have additional questions, let me know. All right, we have another question here, and I see another question here. It says, how do I find my California State Student ID that the UC application requests? Okay, so the California State Student ID is a student ID that is used for California, right? It is also only a thing that public school students will have. So if you are a public school student, you will have one, okay? Now, where do you find it? You actually find it on your transcript, okay? So if you have access to like an unofficial transcript on like Aries or Chalkboard or whatever system your school uses, right? Then you should be able to pull up a transcript like the one that looks like the real one, right? Not just a grade book, right? But if you pull up the real one that looks like the real one, it might not be signed, right? You will actually see that in the top right corner, the bottom middle or the bottom right, there will be a section that says SSID or state ID. That's where you will find it, but it will be on your official or unofficial transcript, not on what's the word I'm looking for, not in like the grade book. Okay, so it'll be on a copy of your unofficial or official transcript. Okay, there's another question here, and it is, can I ED privates and EA public? Well, it depends, right? So for EA, right, this like EA and ED, the schools need to have it, right? There are schools that do not have anything, right? So it really depends on that. There are some public schools, right? Like University of Michigan, UT Austin that have early action. The UCs, they don't have anything, right? The CSUs don't have anything. It's just regular decision, right? Some private schools don't have early decision. Look at USC. It doesn't have early decision, right? So it depends on what they have. And so that's how you have to create your strategy kind of after figuring out your list of colleges, right? And we have another question here. It says, is the UC application different this year for some reason or in some way? No, it's not. It's exactly the same as last year. right? So we haven't seen any changes. It's exactly the same. The UC actually did a huge overhaul maybe about 5 years ago. So since then, there's been no major changes. Okay. All right. Any additional questions I can help you guys with? I'm also gonna look in the Discord to see if there are other questions that might pertain to more people, so that I can kind of do that here. Okay, we have additional questions. So you said USC has ED. From everything that I know, they do not. Um, unless they change it this year, which might be the case. They do not have ED. Stanford also, I know, does not have ED. So not sure where you're getting your information, but that might be a website that you don't want to go to anymore. Okay. And it says, do you have to be turned down from ED1 to apply for ED2? Yes, that's kind of a given, right? Because you can't be committed to going to two different places unless you know the result from one, right? Now, again, not all schools have ED1 and ED2, right? So that's, again, that's why you need to understand what your college looks like so you can create a strategy that works best for you. Okay. So let's look at another question here. We have another question in the Q&A. It says, does any AP scores that we receive next year matter to college admissions in any way? So no, right? I'm sure that's the answer you guys wanted to hear, right? So it's like, no, none of your AP, so for seniors, none of your AP scores from senior year technically matter for college admissions because at that point, you are already going to be in college, okay? So, but here's why I say, well, you should still try your best, is because some of your AP classes might count for credits when you head off to college, right? We hear it every year. Oh, there's something really weird going on with my account, Coach David. Can you take a look? I take a look, and it's like, it says that I'm a sophomore, and I'm like, yeah, it's because they counted like, certain AP credits and like certain class or certain, scores that you got on your AP exams as credit for college, right? They might not let you out of a certain class, but they are credits towards graduation, right? And so that's why they are considering you a sophomore, right? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and all this and all that. But let's say that you're taking 3, 4, 5 APs your senior year, right? If you can get credit for half of those, that'd be great, right? Now, here's the real kind of like the real talk behind this, right? I still want you to take them, right? So if you're taking AP classes, you should sign up for the AP exams, right? But do they really matter in the long run? The answer is no. Okay. So we have a kind of follow-up. It says Stanford is REA and they allow concurrent applications to USC. Unless Stanford changed its policy, I believe that is also incorrect as well. So restrictive early action means that you're not allowed to apply to any other school, early action or early decision, right? So let's take a look. Just want to make sure. Mm -hmm. I am not seeing that on their website at all. I can show you what I'm looking at, right? Again, every school has the ability to change whatever they want, right? So there's no real like, oh yeah, this is set in stone, this and so on and so forth. Like none of that is like in stone. But looking here, right, at this here, right? I don't see a mention of USC. I even searched for USC and I get zero results, right? So, um, So it says policy, if you apply to Stanford with a decision plan of a restricted early action, you may not apply to any other private college, university under their early action, restrictive early action, early decision, or early notification plan. You may not apply to any university under an early binding plan, such as early decision. If you apply to Stanford restrictive early action, you may apply to other colleges and universities under their regular decision plan. If you apply to Stanford under restrictive early action and you are not offered admission, or your application is deferred, you may apply to another college's early decision 2 plan. For exceptions, it says, it is our policy, yada, yada, yada. Let's kind of see here, right? Under FAQ at Stanford. So let's look at the FAQ. Oh, here it is. Okay, so it wasn't. Why didn't it pull up? It's so weird. Oh, okay. My find feature is very like that. So okay. So because the early action program at USC is non-binding, students must apply early to be considered for merit scholarship. USC qualifies as an exception to Stanford's policy. Sure. Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't like that before. This is probably something that has changed, right? So USC actually only started doing early action last year. So maybe they asked Stanford for a pass. Okay. So yeah, again, schools change their policies every year, which is why you need to go in and understand them fully, right? Okay. All right. Additional questions, concerns. Stop sharing here. But before you decide on what you're doing, and here's one thing. Out of the 4,000 universities in the United States, the one university that I tell students not to do restrictive early action to is Stanford. Okay. Unless you've been actively recruited by Stanford, whether it's for a sport or music or art or something else, right? I tell my students not to do Stanford restrictive early action. We had a student getting last year, applied regular decision. Over the past kind of decade, I've had about 15 students get into Stanford, Stanford kind of undergrad, right? I've had other students go to grad school, this and that, but about 15 undergrad students. None of them have applied restrictive early action or early in general, okay? The thing you need to remember is that Stanford is basically good at every single sport that is known to man, right? Whether it is field hockey, soccer, synchronized swimming, right? Diving, volleyball. Think of every other collegiate sport that you can think of, right? They are literally good at every single sport. And so every single kid that is kind of being scouted for that is applying restrictive early action. Okay. Look at the students that are look at the kind of Olympians on the US kind of team, right? They might be on other teams too, but especially for the USA team, right? Look at how many of them go to Stanford, right? Now, the reason why I tell students not to apply restrictive early action is because do you really want to be fighting against gold medal Olympians, right? It's very, very hard to do that, right? And so that's why I tell my students that are going for academics, right, with their academic profile, it's a much better chance for you to get in if you apply regular. Okay, so there's something to keep in mind. Okay, but my own statistics are they're pretty telling of what the situation actually looks like. Okay. All right. Any additional questions or concerns that I can help you guys with? Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. So there was a lot of great questions today, right? Now I know that there are some people here that are in our college application intensive, and they're here to kind of learn some more too. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into kind of essays, into the applications, into the different admissions processes, right? If you do have additional questions, we also have a office hours at 5 o'clock on Thursday, right? So 5 on Tuesday, 5 on Thursday, for college application intensive families to come and ask any questions they have. For our coaching families, we have, Coach Michelle is here at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Again, you have your other office hours with other coaches on the rest of the days of the week as well. Okay. So we'll kind of end it off here. If there are additional questions, make sure to reach out in the Discord. And we will see you guys again next week, right? And just for myself, there will be a financial aid training tomorrow at 6 p.m. There will also be an Ivy League admission secrets training at 6 p.m. on Thursday. Okay. And then I will be traveling down to San Diego for our college application intensive that's happening at University of San Diego. Okay. So if you guys do have additional questions, reach out. If you're a family that I have not talked to about financial aid, reach out, right? If I already talked to you about financial aid and you guys haven't made a decision yet, reach out. I'll see if I can still do the same discount, but the answer is probably no, right? Because we kind of gave you a chance. But whatever the situation, reach out to us if you have any questions, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of, okay? All right. Everyone have a great night. It's a little warm today. Hopefully it cools down a little bit. And I will see a lot of you at the college application intensives coming up, okay? All right. Everyone have a great night. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye-bye.